Hello and welcome back. I'm Shayna Cersei. I'm so excited to paint with you today, and I'm so excited to experiment with you today. Obviously, I've been painting a little bit this morning already. I have paint all over my hands. But today I am going to be doing this composition, which is a very simple landscape composition. We're going to be doing it in the folk art style, very simple shapes, kind of chunky hills here, chunky little bushes, a big bright moon in the top. We'll add some stylized trees later on. But what we're going to be doing today is experimenting with color a little bit more. Now, I did a whole series on color mixing your secondary colors as well as neutrals. So go check those out. I'll put them all in a playlist and put them in the description of this video. But also, I want to talk about complementary colors. Now, we talked about that a little bit when we're talking about the 3 primary colors and how to make your secondary colors, yada, yada, yada. But today we're going to paint this composition, this image with color. I have no idea what colors yet, but any color that I use, I am going to be adding its complementary color to mute or desaturate it. So we're going to have very low saturation or very neutralized colors for this whole thing. That's my goal, is that this will be kind of like a neutrals tutorial-ish, but we're going to be doing it by mixing the complementary colors. And let me tell you what I mean by that. First, let me tell you the combos of complementary colors. So we have, let me see, we have orange, which is a secondary color, and blue, which is a primary color. Sorry, there was still a little orange in my brush there. So blue and orange are complementary colors. Purple, which is a secondary color, and yellow, which is a primary color. And then lastly, we have red. Let me get some red out here. I'm going to do Alizarin Crimson for my red, I guess. Red and green are complementary colors. So complementary colors are always going to be a primary color and a secondary color. Primary color and a secondary color, primary color and a secondary color. So blue, yellow, red are our primary colors, orange, purple, green are our secondary colors. And when we mix those together, they neutralize each other. So let me show you what I mean by that. So if we take yellow and I just start to add a little bit of purple into it, you can see how it's becoming more brown or neutral, okay? Same thing with red and green. If I have red here and I start to add green to it, we're also going to get a desaturated or brownish color. Now, the trick with this is I want to get a range of colors. I don't want them all to be the same brown with the complementary colors that I mix. So that's going to be a little trickier. So I have to really be thoughtful if I'm going to mix. So you can see here, if I mix orange into this blue, I get more of a gray-green, versus if I mix the blue into the orange, you know, it's more on the side of a lighter color or the brownish color. Let's see, if I mix a little yellow into this purple, again, it's going to be different. So I'm going to get a whole bunch of different neutrals or desaturated colors. I actually love this palette, this bluish, reddish. These two colors are going to be awesome together. Love it. And I'm going to use the power of complementary colors to get there versus using my primaries, which is basically just making a secondary and then adding the primary to it. So it's a quicker way of getting there based on the colors that are already in my palette. So I'm using convenience colors. All of these are pre-mixed. I will tell you which ones I'm using as I go. But yeah, let's get started. All right, so the first thing I'm going to decide, this composition, I kind of took it from real life inspiration. There is a mountain ridge that slightly resembles this with a little fire tower in the middle that is near my house. So that's where I got the composition. I am going to lighten up the moon here. This is going to be a moon, not a sun. So this is going to be a nighttime. My goal is a nighttime landscape-ish. But again, we're not going for realism here. This is whimsical, fanciful, imaginary, fun. I do love the kind of neat and clean lines that the folk art genre gives me. Almost forced sometimes, feels forced, but I really like that versus lots of texture and movement, and you know, it's like a grounded, forced composition, which I'm really enjoying. All right, so we're gonna start with the sky around the moon. The moon we're gonna leave probably till last. So this is gonna be almost all white, and we're just gonna put a little gray in it to give it some shape and form. You can barely see it with the lines there, but I want my sky to be pretty dark. So I will say I'm also probably going to use Payne's Gray in some of these. So I'm going to start with my Phthalo Blue here. And I'm going to get quite a bit of this color out. And then I'm going to start to add, so I have an orange here. Let me, whoops, so sorry. Let me get the names of the colors for you, which I always tend to forget. So I'm using my core palette. So the orange I'm using, I'm going to pull out of here, is called Quinacridone Gold. But there's a lot of different oranges out there that you could certainly use. But this is what it looks like kind of on its own. It's this very yellowish carrot orange there that you can see. But I'm going to start to add just a little bit of this. And this orange has a lot of yellow tones to it. So you can see it's really going to lean this on the green side. And the more I add, I'm gonna have to add a lot. There we go. It's gonna start to desaturate it. So we are gonna get this green color. Let's add even a little bit more. There we go. So I get this dark green color. I don't know that that's the color I want for this. So let's think about this a little bit more. Ooh, I could use a different blue that doesn't have as much coolness to it, that has a little more red to it. So I'm going to use, let's see, Ultramarine blue, and also pick up some of that orange. Yes, this is better. This is like a gray, blue, green color. This is much more fitting for me for a sky, but it is desaturated. It's not a bright, vibrant primary color, if you will. So that's the difference. So this I used Phthalo Blue, and this orange, which was a very yellowish orange. So I got a very green color because blue and yellow make green. So it was a very yellowish orange. Didn't have a lot of red in it. Where this blue, Ultramarine blue, is a much redder blue. It's a warmer blue. And then when I added yellow to that, we started leaning towards green, but we get much more of kind of the blue tendencies sticking around while being desaturated. Hope that all makes sense. I know it's a lot. Learning the magic of color mixing can be a lot sometimes, but you can do it. So I'm just gonna start here and find my way across. I'm going for a flat wash. Now, folks are starting to see these kind of simple compositions that I'm doing, these very simple folk art compositions, which, yes, the compositions are simple and the explanation of the painting is simple. However, the execution is not simple. So these are great for practicing water control and learning flat washes. So flat washes are quite difficult sometimes to get in watercolor, often executed by multiple layers. Now, I'm not sure how this is going to go with this because Ultramarine is a granulating color, just FYI. So I'm not sure as it dries what we're going to get on here, if it's going to do some separation and some funky fun things. But again, this is an experiment. Thank you for experimenting with me. So I'm just going across my areas where I need really straight edges first, but quickly. I don't want them to dry. And then bringing my paint all across, getting the whole area an even layer of paint and dampness so that it can all dry at the same time. Now, when doing darker, especially darker flat washes, you may need to do more than one coat to get a truly even flat wash, okay? So just keep that in mind. So we're gonna let that dry. It's gonna lighten and brighten, and we'll see if it does any weird things with the ultramarine as a granulating color, or if we're happy with it, or if we have to do another layer. Step one, done. And I love the color. It's got this greenish but desaturated quality. It's not bright, but it's definitely got some richness to it. A plus number one. Okay. So let's go down to the foreground here. So this is going to be a night scene. So everything kind of has to be a little bit darker, but this big moon here is going to be casting light. So we'll deal with that. Let's go back to, this green color. So I've made green by mixing blue, and so the complementary color of green is red. So I'm going to add some red to this. All right, so we have brown, a beautiful rich brown here. I really like this red, this yellow. Let's see, so purple, let's mix some purple and yellow. So this was purple and yellow, but I'm adding more purple to it to give it this kind of richer purple tone, but again, desaturated purple. So let me show you what that means. This is a desaturated purple, still purple to our eyes. Here it's a little lighter. But then here's the saturated purple. So you can see the difference between saturated, desaturated. So this has complementary yellow in it, but not a lot, just enough. They're not equally mixed 50-50. I still want this to retain some of its purple tones, but not have its vibrancy. All right, so let's see, I have this brown, purple, which this brown, I can't even remember anymore. It was originally, phthalo blue and the yellow. I'm gonna add a little more phthalo blue here, just to pop this a little closer to green, but again, a very desaturated green. So here are some greens, also a little desaturated, but here's this green. It's got a very warm tone to it, but you can still read it next to the purple as green. Okay. Alrighty, let's see. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? Okay, I'm gonna take this green and I am going to start at the bottom and wash my way up to a lighter color, slightly lighter at the top. But I don't really want it to have a lot of texture. I want it to be like pretty even gradient. So darkest at the bottom gets a little lighter towards the top. Okay. Ooh, I love it. Now we could continue with this green for more kind of realistic landscape, like grounds and hills and grasses are generally green, and we could definitely add browns, but I really love this purple color. But maybe I'll do the bushes in purple. But I have this like orangey color here too, this reddish. We started with red, we added a little green. I get this like nice fall orangey red color. So I love this purple and red here combo added into here. So the question is, do we do it on the hills or the bushes? I think I'm gonna go crazy. I think I'm gonna do the hills, and then the bushes I might do in this blue color and bring that down here. Let's let this completely dry, okay? The other part of this type of style is often you're filling in blocks and they're next to each other and you can't let any of them bleed into each other. So you have to let things dry. So take a break. We're gonna let this dry and we're gonna come back and finish the hills, probably taking some drying time pauses in between. All right, we're back. And now we're going to dive right into our first hill. And we're gonna do them all pretty much the same way. We're gonna try to keep them darker on the bottom and with a gradient towards the top. So I'm trying to decide whether I want the red to be up against the blue or the purple. The purple is closer in tone, so I'm gonna make it a little bit more dramatic. I'm trying to visualize in my mind. All right, I'm gonna put the red up here. No going back now. And again, I'm gonna go over my areas closest to the bottom first with my nice clean lines where I want there to be clean lines. And then I'm gonna rinse off my brush and going quickly because I don't want these sections to dry and leave harsh lines in my, my gradient wash. And you can see down here, it's already drying. I'm gonna actually re-wet with my brush, and I'm gonna bring in more color, drop it in the bottom here, rinse my brush off, dab it off really good. And now I'm just using a damp brush and very light pressure just to even out this gradient. There we go, hill number 2. Ooh, loving it. All right, I'm gonna use my heat tool and pause for a second just to dry this section so we can keep moving on. All right, we're back, that section's dry. Let's get to this purple that we made. So this desaturated purple, so we started out with a Dioxazine Purple, and then I added bits of Diarylide yellow, or a very warm yellow, a Gamboge yellow would work. Just a little bit, not a lot, you can see. So it's still purple, but a desaturated purple. And I'm gonna do that. I'm actually gonna make a little more of this color because I wanna make sure I have enough. So here we go, back to purple, purple. Adding in little bits of yellow until I'm kind of happy where we end up. There, maybe a little tiny bit more. Okay, there we go, still purple. Put it on here. I don't want it to be too close to the red either. Add a little more purple back to it. There we go. Yeah, I think that's better. All right, so I just want to have enough to get through this whole section. All right, I'm gonna dip my brush in water, pick up a bunch of the paint. I want a really well-loaded, juicy brush to get through this because I want this color to be super wet and saturated as I'm taking my time detailing my lines here. And that I've noticed is really the trick. This is going to be much easier on 100% cotton paper for any of you. For those of you who might use a cellulose paper, things might dry very quickly on you. And that can be very frustrating because they're even drying a little quickly on me. You could try a wet on wet technique with this. Give it a try, see how it goes. There we go, and I just want to get up here in this corner. Getting the edges clean, but maintaining your wash, your gradient, and the natural, the uniform dampness all across so it all dries at the same time is challenging. It is really challenging, so just be mindful of that. If that gets you or frustrates you, you are not alone. All right, heat tool again, dry this layer. But this color combination is so cool. Love it. All right, and we're back. So our last section here, which has to go around these bushes, I think has to be in the yellow, in the realm of a yellow color, but a desaturated yellow. So I'm gonna start out actually with I'm adding in some Diarylide yellow here. And now the opposite of yellow is purple again, but we're gonna start with yellow. I'm gonna take some of this already desaturated purple and start to add it to this yellow. And it's really just gonna kind of darken. All right, so we have a richer, more gold yellow color. It's not as bright and brilliant. It's more of a brown. All right, we're gonna go with it. Now I have these bushes to contest with. I am going to do them in a darker color, so I'm not gonna be too precious about their edges, but I am gonna kind of just go right around them down to my bottom here. Rinse off my brush, add water to the top. So when you add water to the top and you kind of push it into the color, when you're adding a lot of water, you have to make sure to spread it out evenly. So you can still push, like I'm starting at the top and pushing down towards the color so it remains brighter on top and less bright. And I'm pushing all of the color and water towards the bottom. But again, I'm dabbing my brush off when I'm taking off excess moisture that we don't need up there. There we go. All right, that's exciting. Yes, this triad of colors, it's satisfying. All this, there's 5 colors here. You know, we have a blue, we have a purple, we have almost a reddish, orange, yellow, green. It's very satisfying because they're all muted and desaturated. It feels really good. All right, and now we're gonna do these bushes here, and I'm gonna do these bushes in the same color as the sky to hopefully bring a little balance. Maybe. Should I do them in an orange? No. I don't think so. I feel like that's going to be too much warm color here. I feel like I need to bring another cool color in. All right, so we're going to do it in a color similar to the sky. So Ultramarine was the blue I used, and Quin Gold was the orange, orangey yellow that I brought in. All right, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a lot of water to my brush. So my brush is saturated with water already. I dipped it in my water, and now I'm gonna pick up some of this color. And the reason is because I want this to be slightly lighter. I have 3 bushes here. I'm going to put this color in. It's gonna be lighter than this. But I'm gonna put shadows in to separate the 3 bushes in just a moment after they are dry. So we're gonna put the first layer in. These are gonna be the highlights. So just because you're playing with simple shapes and kind of blocky or chunky shapes and things like that, doesn't mean you can't also still use light in your paintings. And I actually think using light and shadow in a very deliberate way in these types of paintings can be really powerful and look really great. We have a little bit of a harsh edge on some of these but I think we're gonna be okay. I'm gonna let that dry, and then we're gonna bring in a darker color. So let that dry completely. All right, and now that that's dry, I'm gonna remix some more of this color with that. And I'm gonna actually add a little Payne's Gray to this to deepen it even a little bit more, okay? So now I'm gonna come in, and now I have, the moon is over here, so I'm gonna have the light coming from this direction. So, I'm gonna paint in these really harsh shadows at first. Oh, I'm losing my tape over here. Don't want to lose my hard line. All right, now I'm gonna rinse off my brush. I'm actually gonna switch to a smaller brush with just a little dampness to it. Let's see if I waited too long. I might have a little bit. There we go. I'm using quite a bit of pressure to rub out the harsh line there. You could have definitely done these one at a time if you wanted. I'm gonna add a little more. And don't go too far because we're actually gonna add shadows to the ground line for these as well. But I love this super harsh shadow. I think it's funky, it's poppy, it's bold, deliberate, especially on this very muted palette. It brings some unanticipated excitement to the piece. Okay, everything else is pretty flat so far. And even though this is a muted color, this very big contrast, I think, adds a lot to this piece. So let that dry again. We will add some shadow down here below. We have to do our moon, and then we can also add some additional trees, just tree branches, trees with no leaves on them, just for fun. Okay, let it all dry. We're gonna come back. You want clean water to do your moon. So if your water is not clean, go clean it out, and we will do the moon. All right, so now I'm gonna do wet on wet. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fill in this whole moon area, but I'm gonna be really careful towards my edges. And I actually might not even touch the edge completely because I don't want any of that blue, which it might, but I don't want any of that blue bleeding in. I really want to keep this, and even around the red as well, or the reddish orange down here. Let that soak in for a second and then just add a little bit more. And then while that soaks in, you don't want it to dry, but give it a second so that it can settle, especially if you're using 100% cotton paper. I'm just gonna clear off a space on this palette here. So you can see, I'm gonna use Payne's Gray. You could use a neutral tint as well. This Payne's Gray is pretty neutral, but this is gonna be a nice, contrast of a neutral color, I think. So we're just going to pop in, and I'm going to give my moon kind of a shaded side, or a side that where you see more craters than the other. I'm going to put one or two over here, but this side is going to be a little bit darker. But you want it to be subtle. You don't want it to be super. And I'm sorry about the glare on there. And as it dries, you'll be able to see it even better. But you don't want it to be super dark. As it dries, it will lighten even more. But that contrast there with a little bit of shading and this bright white side is, and texture against all of this kind of even flatness, I think just looks really lovely. It brings some extra dimension that the rest of the piece didn't have. So we're gonna let that dry as well. You can do this multiple times. Less is more sometimes, so make it very, very light, let it dry, come back and assess it and decide, is that good enough for you? Do you need to go a little bit darker? But you can always kind of inch your way up to it. You can let it completely dry, re-wet it, and do that process again, adding in a little bit more darkness. But I think that's good. I'm gonna let it all dry and see what we get. All right, our moon is all dry, or mostly dry, and I love it. I think it's just the right amount of additional kind of shading and texture to give it a little pop. I could definitely go one more maybe, but with that being said, we're gonna move on to our trees. The other thing I want to tell you is that I'm only gonna do one layer on all of this, because do you really wanna see me do 3 or 4 layers? No. I've shown you the basics, and now you can go back in if you want and repeat all of these steps, and kind of like we did here with this dramatic shading, you could also bring that into your hills here and really make the bottom layer darker and more saturated with pigment, and you know, make that transition a little bit more contrasty if you wanted. That's a great kind of alternate or next step to this if you want to. It looks lovely the way it is, but I'm just letting you know, like, these are the things I think about when I'm asking myself, is my painting done? Could I take it a step further? What would that look like? And you try to imagine it in your head or do a little swatch somewhere. All right, so I'm gonna do just some trees, some leafless trees. You can draw these in if you want. Unfortunately, if you're drawing on the paper, on top of the paint, you can't erase once you've drawn on, but if it just makes you feel better to, or you have a little bit more control with a pencil to kind of sketch in a guideline for yourself, like I'm gonna put a tree here. I tend to have my lines kind of be, when I paint, go straight from paint. If I'm trying to draw a perpendicular line, they tend to lean one way or the other. So just giving myself one guideline to follow so I know. And with a pencil, I can concentrate a little bit more, just to know to keep my lines upright and not kind of leaning too far one way or the other. And these, I'm using a rigger brush. And I think the thing for me to remember is that you want your, you don't want all of your branches coming from the same point, and that branches branch off of each other. So this one branch sprouted this branch, which sprouted this branch, not this branch sprouted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 branches. I mean, you can do that. That's a very, even more stylized way. I'm going to stem this a little bit and give it a little wobble so it's not too perfect. So there are a million ways to do trees, from realistic to stylized. You just have to find your style. I'm gonna make this even a little thicker down here to support all these branches. Your branches could have curly, more of a curly nature to it, or not a curly isn't the word, well, I guess, but more of a, if your tree was like this, they could have a more rounded kind of nature to them, and I feel like people do that a lot. They have lots of curvy lines versus more straight, kind of raggedy, scraggly, I guess might be the word I would use. With some, you know, angles in them. These, I think, are a little bit more true to an actual tree branch, even though this is definitely a stylized version. But tree branches have like lots of crooked, they're not usually as curved or smooth in their arcs. They kind of jut each way, this way and that. And if you wanted to add more, so as you go further away or higher in the painting, so the height is further away, you can make your trees smaller and smaller. You also, and that does communicate distance, You also don't have to in a painting like this. You can keep things weirdly kind of varying sizes that they wouldn't actually appear in real life. That can add a bit of whimsy to it. In some instances, that's up to you. But if I did this one back here, so this and this are further back, but I actually am going to make them, this one about the same height, a little bit shorter. So it's smaller this way because the bottom of it starts higher, but it's actually going to, because it's on a flat plane, it's going to be about the same, maybe a little bit shorter in height. And again, there's no really right way or wrong way to do this, especially when you're, you know, not trying to be hyper realistic. You can do whatever you want, whatever feels good, whatever looks good to you. That's the beauty of art. There are rules, and all the rules are, they're not meant to be followed to a T, but the rules, when you learn them, you just know, if I do this, it will communicate this to my viewer. It will communicate realism. It will communicate a sense of depth or shadow. But you can break those rules if that's not important to you, if you don't need to communicate that thing and something else is more important in your painting. All right, I'm gonna give this stuff some shadows. I think I'm gonna give it shadows. Yes, yes, I should give these shadows. Okay, we're gonna go for it. This is what it looks like now without shadows. It's lovely, it's beautiful. I could stop here. I am gonna give it shadows. So all of these things, the moon is coming this way. So the rule would be, if light is coming from kind of this direction, all of my shadows should go this way. Now, I certainly could make them go the opposite way, and that would communicate a sense of unbalance or wrongness to the viewer. And sometimes that is exactly what you want to communicate, depending on what you're trying to say. You would look at it and be like, why doesn't this feel right? I don't know. It makes me feel uncomfortable. None of the shadows seem to be correct. But I don't know what, you know, and then for an untrained eye, sometimes it'd be like, I don't know why it's making me feel uncomfortable, but it is. So now if I did a shadow this way and then I did a shadow this way, it'd be like, it would make your mind wonder. And you might not know why, if you're not, you know, really trained to look for the right things or used to it. And sometimes as artists, that's what we want to do. We want to make people wonder or feel uncomfortable or feel... Now, I'm not worried about making these exactly like the tree above, as long as they're kind of a close approximation. As long as your brain sees those things, it's not smart enough. Well, it's smarter than you. It's outsmarting you. It's basically like, that doesn't really matter. We don't need to match up every branch to the thing above it in this particular instance. It's like moving on. We have more important things. Yes, that's a shadow. It's a shadow of a tree. They look very similar. All right, so I'm gonna do this shadow down here of these bushes. I did these kind of in this light Payne's gray. These are a little bit more substantial. I'm actually going to do them in a very light version of another layer of the green with a little Payne's gray. So I want them to have a little, not just gray over top, but a little color to them, because they're casting a shadow on a thing with color. And these shadows are just kind of blobs going off in this direction. I'm going to round them a little bit more. And you can certainly make your shadows like super purposeful and super like identical to what's above. and like harsh lines, and that can be fun too. These I'm not gonna worry too much about. So there we go, a very basic shadow kind of coming off in the same direction, a little slant to it in terms of the shape of it. And we are done. Let's take off our tape. You should wait longer for your whole thing to dry, but I'm gonna take it off now for the big reveal. And this is super satisfying, the whole thing. I'm loving these colors. They feel very peaceful to me. They feel very like, I don't know what the word is. I'll think of words. But it's very soft and calm and lovely, and I really like it. I love the texture in the moon. I think the shadows definitely add to it, but I think it could have stood on its own. Oh, I forgot one little piece. Do you see this little tiny blob in the top? It's a pencil, but I need to fill it in with the little Payne's gray. I'm gonna take my brush. This is a fire tower. So the view that I see or used to see from my old office was this mountain range, and it had this little fire tower on top. And this is, anybody who lives in this area will know this view. They'll know it's a stylized version of this view. We'll let that dry, but it's a little tiny fire tower that sits up top of this gorgeous kind of panoramic vista that you can see from the town of New Paltz. So if you're from New York, or if you know New York, or if you've never been to New York and you're gonna visit, and you wanna visit one of the beautiful quintessential country towns, it's a college town, country town, New Paltz is a great place to visit. So in the Hudson Valley. Anyway, thank you so much for painting with me. I'm Shayna Cersei. I hope you've enjoyed this little whimsical power of the complementary colors tutorial. I think this is such a great lesson to learn, and I love knowing what my complementary colors can do for each other to create these beautiful soft palettes. So thank you so much. Don't forget to check the description for the list of colors we used, as well as links to my social media, Instagram, my studio crew, classroom. I'd love for you to join and support me as an artist. But until next time, happy painting, everybody.